Howdy.
I'm so excited to be here. Transmedia SF was one of the first meetups I came to when I moved to San Francisco about 2.5 years ago, and it was one of the reasons I was so excited about moving to the Bay Area. And I'm really glad I can be here talking tonight. So who in the audience would identify as a maker? Raise your hand. Awesome! That's a good number of people. Okay, who identifies as an educator of some sort? Okay, keep your hands raised. Who knows an educator or a teacher? Okay, if your hand's still not raised, who knows a kid? Okay, great. So what I'm here to talk to you about tonight is about making in education. And more than that, change making in education. And I'm specifically going to tell you a little bit about the CityX project. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm just going to show you a real short video that kind of overviews what the CityX project is, and then I'll go into it a little bit more after that. So if you guys can't hear, shout. I'm going to start that. There we go.
And I'm 8. My name's Lauren and I'm 11 years old. My name is Lydia and I'm 2 years old.
Hello, citizens of Earth. Our journey from the planet couldn't have gone any better. Though we had a few minor problems, we successfully landed on our new homeworld as of late next week. We are turning to the people of Earth to help us design our first city, CityX. Our citizens have begun identifying their problems, and we shall make their translations available to all the citizens of Earth. Please, take the time to get to know them so we can help them all on our new and sometimes dangerous planet. Our future and the future of mankind is in your hands. Thank you and good luck.
A safer football helmet, and then a robot companion and assistant.
You need to do whatever it takes to get this project into your classroom.
Project. We've been working on this for about 1.5 years, and basically it's a curriculum for 3rd to 6th grade students to begin to learn about the design process, about making, and particularly about 3D modeling and 3D printing. So the reason we started this was we started to see some of these tools going into schools. We're hearing a lot more every day about the maker movement. And we wanted, in particular with 3D printing, to create some curriculum that would help makers who wanted to do this in schools and would help educators who were also interested in making kind of have a place to start. So that's what CityX is. And as Maya said, the story of CityX actually started here at Transmedia SF, the startup weekend. We kind of started by just throwing some printers into a classroom and seeing what would happen. And then we realized that in the 8 to 12 age range, we really needed a little bit more of a story to make this whole thing cohesive. So this amazing team helped come up with the story of CityX, which is basically the story that these space colonists have just landed on another planet, and they've sent their transmissions to Earth, and the kids in the workshop are the designers who need to help solve the problems here on Earth. And another shout out to the wonderful Justin right here. Actually, he voiced our mayor, so he was the voice you guys heard. Wonderful mayor of CityX. And this here is one of the citizens, to give you an example. This is a citizen of CityX. So in the workshop, each kid gets one of these little transmissions, a citizen card, and they need to figure out how to solve this citizen's problem. And we do this by going through the design process. So if you're not familiar with it, this here is the Stanford D School design process. And it's not just about making, it's about empathizing. It's about really understanding problems and how to come up with useful solutions. Then we actually have the kids come up with prototypes with just simple clay. They create clay models, like this boy over here. We then have them turn their models into 3D models. We talk about perspectives, we talk about primitive shapes, using free online software like Tinkercad and 123D Design. And then finally, we talk a little bit about 3D printing, because the story of City X is that all they have on this other planet is a 3D printer. So we actually need to turn their inventions into 3D models so that they can send them to City X so they can actually make them there. And we started doing this in my hometown of Appleton, Wisconsin. This is a picture from our first workshop. We had no idea what we were doing, and we had no story at that point. But it was really fun, and the kids loved it. And so eventually, we kind of grew that. We came up with the story, and then we had the opportunity to go test this in different places around the world. One of the really incredible things we found about 3D printing in terms of why is it valuable is that in some way it actually serves as a way to communicate an idea without a common language. So if you can take an idea and turn it into a 3D model, you can send it to another place in the world, and even if you don't speak the same language, you can actually print and hold that idea in your hand. And so we had the opportunity to go to a few different places, including Lebanon and Budapest, and experiment with this. And what was really neat was that the kids actually got it. The cultural differences didn't matter in this context. They still understood the design process. They still understood making. They were just these basic human things. And in Budapest, actually, this is the first time we entirely translated the workshop to Hungarian. And we had some designers there facilitate it. And the kids still rocked it. They did so great. And it was really cool to see that this idea could translate to other places. Because that was one of the main things we wanted to do. We wanted to see how we could use these technologies to connect kids. So we went around and we tested a few other places. And one of the places we went to after Budapest was this tiny little town called IDEAco, Alaska. This is a little village, a 300-person Yupik village on the far west coast of Alaska. And inside the classroom, it may not look very different from some of the other classrooms we worked in, but this is actually a view of IDEAco from the plane as we flew in. The only way to get to IDEAco is to take a prop plane. There are no roads in this town. And it was when we were in IDEAco that I really started to think about, what more can we be doing with a project like this? It's one thing to sort of introduce the ideas and the concepts of making and design to littler kids, but we were sitting around at lunch, and some of the high schools were gathering around us, and I was like, oh my gosh, why aren't we doing anything with these older kids? Like, these are the kids who could actually be making a huge difference. So one of the interesting things about IDEAco is that in their school, they're really well funded. Every kid has a laptop. But when they go home, most kids don't have running water in their homes. And in the winter, when the river freezes over, that's the only way they're able to import fuel is on this river. And so if the river freezes over, the only way they can import fuel is to fly it in. So a lot of times they're just really cold in the winter. And there are some major problems in this community that a process like design and tools like we see in making could actually help to solve. And so that got me thinking a little bit more about how can we be teaching not just making, but specifically human-centered design, real design skills to get kids solving real problems. And so I think we have this huge opportunity that is, youth in terms of solving problems, not just in places like IDEAco, but everywhere. If you look at where we live, there are opportunities in every city, there are problems in every place that people live that we can be solving with some of these tools. And how cool would it be if we actually were able to do that with kids? If they were actually the driving force in making that happen. And so since that visit to EAC, I've kind of shifted to not just thinking about how can we turn kids into makers, but thinking about how can we turn kids into change makers. Change makers are people who can not just make something because it's fun to make it, but they also know how to utilize those skills in order to help people. And what's really neat is that we found that by shifting the focus from just making to change making, we were able to get a lot more of the kids excited about the technologies we were using. Because in the classrooms with CityX, for example, we often found that some of the kids would get really excited about the 3D printers, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And that was, maybe like at most half the class. And the other half of the class, they're not really, the geeky sort, like many of us, maybe. And they're like, why are we doing this? But as soon as we introduced those citizens of CityX, the people that they needed to help, the reason that they needed to learn these skills, we had 100% engagement. So what I've been talking about a lot lately is not just that we need to be bringing making into schools, but we need to be bringing the reasons for making into schools. We need to be bringing change making into schools. Because that actually is kind of a missing element for getting kids excited about technology. Because some people really love tech just for tech, and other people want to know what you can do with it. And I think that's an incredible opportunity that we have. And so I wanted to just kind of share a little bit about our next project, which is called Reboot City. This is a civic innovation game for high schoolers. And this is kind of looking at that problem. How can we actually begin to get high school age students, even college age students, involved with the types of making that can actually impact their local communities? How can they actually solve different problems that we all face, be it San Francisco or a tiny town in Alaska? And with that, I just wanted to say, so you guys all know teachers, or you are teachers. These are some different awesome ways that you can engage. We've got, we're looking for regional partners. We have a few regional partners around the world who run the CityX workshop locally. We're looking for more of those. So if any of you know anyone who might be interested in running this workshop, you can go check this out. We also, just last month, released a totally free toolkit. It's literally includes everything you need in order to run the CityX project. So if you are a maker and you want to take this into your kid's school, or if you are a teacher and you want to start to introduce some making, we put together this resource. It has all the citizen cards, it has the videos from our wonderful Justin, the mayor, and all of that stuff. So you can start to bring this in, and we also did some Common Core alignment. So if you're a teacher, you know that's very important right now. And then finally, with Reboot City, we're really just looking for ideas and partners and things like that. So if you're interested in that sort of concept of how can we turn kids into change makers, I would love to talk to you, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts. We're looking for not just advisors, but we're also looking for some schools and organizations to pilot our first program with this fall. So if any of you know anyone who would be interested in that, please come talk to me. And with that, I'll take some questions.
Yeah, and repeat the question for the cameras. Okay.
So just a quick two-part question. One, how did you select the initial cities that you did all those pilot programs in? And two, where does most of your funding come from? Do you rely on the city regional partners to actually provide the resources, or is your organization?
Yeah, great. So the question was, how do we select the cities, and then how are we funded? So the city selection really just came through friends. I went to this awesome program called Singularity University, if any of you are familiar with that. And I'm really fortunate to know a lot of people in different places. And so when kind of the stars aligned, that's sort of where we ended up at different places. We just kind of spent a year testing this in schools. A lot of the testing was done either here in the Bay Area or in the Midwest, which is where the rest of my team lives. So that was more just sort of convenience factor. The other ones were whatever worked out. And our funding was actually provided by 3D Systems for the development of this project. They were our presenting sponsor. They're a big 3D printing company, so they're incredible in giving us some printers and some support to actually develop this. And now we're at the point of actually turning it into a sustainable program. So we're doing that through different sort of licensing with school districts, regional partnerships, and things like that. More questions?
More questions?
I just heard an interview with the Khan Academy, which is a pretty big success in the education space. Was there any kind of conjoining with what you're doing?
I don't know. I've never really thought about how we might work with Khan Academy. The CityX project is a super hands-on experience. It's meant to really get kids, playing with their hands and building things and thinking, using this sort of D-school design process, which is very much about iteration. I think that'd be pretty hard to replicate in a video, which is more what Khan Academy is about. But I do think that Khan Academy is an excellent example of some of the great new tools that we're seeing in the education space, and some ways that teachers can sort of flip their classrooms to do more hands-on activities like the CityX project.
Have you connected any of the projects you've done to like any robotics programming languages like Arduino, or have you like made the yet?
We haven't done a lot, and we work with 8 to 12-year-olds. So that's a great question, and we're always getting asked, what do we have for high schoolers or older kids? This is about a 6-hour workshop, so it's really meant to be an introduction to these ideas, and it really focuses on rapid prototyping and manufacturing. So it's not so much about the coding aspect, although I'd love to see more of that for sure in a program like Reboot City for the older kids. And there are, not to say that younger kids can't do that, there are a lot of great resources for getting younger kids to do coding, but we haven't.